Good afternoon, everyone. Doing a quick mic check, and then we'll get our stream going. Let me know if you can hear me. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another casual stroll through Lord of the Rings Online. My name is Matt Elliott. I go by Scenario on the message boards, and I'm a senior world designer working on Lord of the Rings Online. I want to do a quick mic check, make sure everyone can hear me before we dive into things. So if you can hear me, let me know. But otherwise, we will get things going shortly. Alrighty, well, hopefully you all can hear me. So we'll get things rolling. So welcome to the second in our series of the Rivers of Middle-earth streams. Last month, we did the Brandywine River. That was our first river, really, honestly, for LOTRO, though we did have the River Loon as well. Those were kind of our two main ones, though the amount of landscape that the River Loon, which runs between Ered Luin and the Shire, comprises a very, very, very small chunk of what that river is. We did the Brandywine last week, going all the way from way up north in Evendim, all the way down to Sarnford in between the Shire and Cardolan. And this week we're starting to go through the Anduin, the Great River. Honestly, the longest river that we have in Lord of the Rings Online. In large part because Rovanian is such a fixture in much of the game. We kind of crisscross it and back and forth it a lot after Moria, starting in Lothlorien, and then we work our way down through Rohan, and then we found our way back up in towards Mirkwood again, and looping around, and then coming back down from where we're starting right now, which is in Elderslade. So before I get going on this, I'm going to put out my usual disclaimers. This is a world design focus stream where I'm going to be talking about what goes into making the landscape and whatnot for Lord of the Rings Online. And particularly, we're focusing on the rivers here. And that means that I won't be answering any questions related to things that are outside of my purview. I'm a world designer. I'm not going to be able to answer questions about things like class balance or instance mechanics or lag, those sorts of things. If you have questions about the landscape, if you have questions about housing, feel free to ask them here. I am certainly happy to do my best to try to answer those. If you have other questions, we do have other streams that you can chime in on. Our Friday's Court of the Ring stream is kind of our catch-all community stream. In addition to that, we have our forums and our message boards, so feel free to use those to ask your questions as well. So before we start, let's see. I know there's one comment from Druid's Fire in the chat saying the Anduin is really Schrodinger's river. It will try to kill you with a debuff or not. Answer depends on where you are. Generally, and once we get down there, we'll talk a little bit about it. Outside of a couple waterfalls, I think most of the river is fairly traversable. Though, if you happen to go off a particularly large waterfall while swimming in the river, I can't really be blamed for you arriving at a defeat circle. So we'll get things going. So the river really, the river proper doesn't really start in Elderslade, but there are a lot of little tributaries that lead into it. So we're starting here very, very far north in Elderslade. You can see here almost up into Carbronach, for example. So we're really up there. And this is just a cold river with rapids and fells coming out of it. Elderslade actually has a significant number of little rivers and streams and whatnot all scattered throughout it. Um, which, when I think I've talked about this before, when talking about the construction of the region originally, like there was one person who came onto the team after we had done a considerable amount of work on it and had requested, waterfall caves behind everything, and it was just there are a lot of rivers, there are a lot of waterfalls, and it just was not really viable to do that. This little like valley up here was just kind of a like this whole section in general doesn't get much attention as part of the Elderslade content in general, anyways. Um, so it's just kind of this meandering valley space, which I'm okay with having spaces like that. I like having spaces like that. Though I am noticing it's missing some frills. I'm wondering if that is the scene file or if there is an issue in my build. We'll find out as we get further south into more complex areas, but I would imagine there'd be more frills in here. So this could be just my build being broken. That's the fun of doing these things on a development environment. So up here we've got a nice view of the entrance of Gundabad, and where the river that we were just following along kind of tumbles down alongside here, along with the Angmarum encampment here as well. It was fun coming back to using some of these assets again after having a break from them for 15 years. So we're following this along. So this stream is probably going to be broken up over a few different actual streams because the Anduin is very long and it's got a lot of little rivers flowing into it that I think are worthwhile exploring. So even starting here in Elderslade, we've got a few that we will kind of hitch back and forth between as we make our way down. If we can make it to Lothorian by the end of the stream, I will be happy. Stretch goal is making it to Rohan, but that might be a bit ambitious. All right, so we do have frills here, so it's likely an issue with that scene file, or just we never put frills in it. Love a good glacial lake or mountain lake. Growing up where I grew up too, up in the mountains, these kinds of things were all over the place. They weren't huge, but they were always fun to you go hiking and then all of a sudden you just happen across it. Well, there's a great view of the Three Peaks. So yeah, I think the Anduin definitely is in relation to Lotro just by volume, more important and more consequential to the story of Lord of the Rings and the story of Lotro itself than the Brandywine is. Even though the Brandywine is kind of your first big foray into the rivers of the game, I think it weaves through so much of the content, and it has a slightly different character throughout all of that content too. You start up here where it's just kind of this rocky, glassy lake with the rivers flowing through it, and then as you approach the cliff that we're coming up on, it's only one of three, I think it's three, waterfalls that tumble down and really start the formation of the Anduin Basin. So we'll take a look down there. I'm not going to go all the way down there because there are some other waterways to the east that I want to check out as well for you guys. Carissa 1066 says, "What are you referring to when you say frills?" That's a great question. So you look here on the landscape as I'm moving around. Usually we have, when it comes to scene assets, there are three ways of classifying them. There's frills, there's scene objects, and there are hand-placed objects. So when you're looking at the landscape here, you have things like the grass that is even swaying a little bit. Like those are super simple, very high-performant assets that we can just shotgun all over the place, and they fill in the ground basically. After that, we have scene objects, which are things like bushes, trees, rocks in the scene file. Typically, those have physics, though a lot of bushes we're leaning away from giving them physics. Um, and then we have hand placed, which you look at the rocks, you look at the buildings, and even some bushes and trees can be hand placed. So those are kind of like three different classes of how we place things. Um, the first two are are more programmatically placed compared to the um, the last set, the hand placed stuff. So here we go, another tributary into Elder Slade, or from Elder Slade into the Anduin Basin. This was one of the spaces that there was a request for a waterfall cave behind every waterfall, because there's lots of stepped waterfalls throughout all of this. Um, the idea here being that we have, three large waterfalls that kind of tumble down, and each one kind of had some sort of hook associated with it. That first one that we ran down, that's leading you up into, the northern reaches into Carbronach, and if you find the right way through, it'll eventually take you into things like Angmar as well, or even further north if we ever decided we wanted to let you go further north. This one here actually leads you to one of the instance spaces for this region, where you get to fight a cold worm. I forget that character's name off the top of my head. We have so many different names. But this one here, the path kind of weaves back and forth across the river like the other side did, eventually leading you to a cave mouth where the water comes out from. Whole lot of drakes going on up here. Whole lot of drakes. Don't think we need to go up too much further. You get the gist. And then we'll work our way over to the third one, which acted as, or continues to act as, the region boundary for Elder Slade. Before Elder Slade was implemented, it also acted as kind of the big tease, the thing that players could run up to and look at, but couldn't get beyond. Our classic, like, maybe we'll build a region on the other side of this someday. So we'll work our way over there. As we come down out of the mountains, everything clears up. You get a better view of everything in the distance. Still think one of my favorite assets that came out of this series of regions, though, is the cloud entities that we could place around wherever we felt like it. I think that it sells the Misty Mountains. I think it does a good job of that. I know sometimes they can be a little performance heavy, especially when there's a lot of overdraw. But I think for our game, not having the latest and greatest when it comes to technologies related to particle systems and volumes and whatnot, I think these cloud volumes do a pretty good job of implying clouds rolling off of the mountains at the very least. That's right, we have one more little tributary here. So maybe it was, what, 4? I guess must have been 4. 4 waterways instead of 3. There's a lot to remember in this game. This one, you don't really get anything other than the waterfall here. There is, like, let me rock it up so you can see a little bit. There is a pass up to there and then to a lookout here, but that's about it. Boom. Make our way further this way. We'll jump in the water up here, and then I'll fling myself off of the waterfall, as I am wont to do when I am going through these areas. All right. So yeah, here we come to what was previously a region impassable. Before Elder Slade was introduced, this bridge here did not exist. So players could, look across, but they couldn't actually get down and across from here. So now we're in Arid Mithrin, and we're gonna hop. We're gonna make the jump. I think that probably would have pancaked me if I had done that without my special admin sauce on. This was a fun little like valley to make too. I don't think there's really much of anything down in here. There might be a few, mixed spawns here and there, or a resource node or something here and there, but little spaces like this that are just kind of like out of the way little exploration nooks are always just kind of appealing to me. Um, I enjoy seeing where if I just like follow a path, where will it take me kind of thing. So we'll work our way down here. And then this will take us into Mist Hollow. One of our pre-Elder Slade regions. It was, I think, how did we set that up that year? I think we did Vales of Anduin, Mist Hollow, and Elder Slade all in one year. I think that's how it went. No, sorry, Wells of Langflood. So the idea being that we were hoping to try to see what we could do by spreading out the updates over the year, right? Have 3 regions come out, spread out over the year, see what that does. Culminating in what was basically the prelude to Gundabad with the War of Three Peaks. I know with the War of Three Peaks originally, it kind of left off with a cliffhanger. You'd finish the story for it, and then there was really nowhere else for you to go. All right, here we go. Sploosh. What is this? Oh, it's just you're hanging on there, little plants. Good for you. And we're down. So I think normally that would kill people. And because of that stuck spot is okay by our standards. Normally, we wouldn't want to have those pits, but I think having the death volumes, let me just see. At the very least it said die, so we'll work our way up here. So we've got two waterfalls converged up there, and then we've got another couple on the other side to kind of fill in everything. This whole region was an interesting region too, because it kind of brought us a little bit back to Rohan. It gave us an opportunity to, dig into some of the history behind where the Rohirrim came from, what they were before they became the Rohirrim, which culminated in this really, really cool POI up here that, Proto-Rohan. But we sprinkled that throughout the whole region. Proton, that's what we'll call it. All right. So here in Mist Hollow, the rivers, this is really kind of where we say that where we say the Anduin really starts for us, because it is kind of this convergence of a bunch of little things into one larger river body. Let's see, we'll get a good view. Oh no, don't jump off a cliff quite yet. Let's sneak our way around here so we can get a view of the valley ahead. I'll take a break to get something to drink. Love that view. That looks great. Jumping off waterfalls like it's Indiana Jones. Mr. Frank Drebin says, will there be 4K textures in the future? If you're asking about the UI upscaling, I know that there's a lot of work that's going to be happening on that over the course of the year, though that is outside of my department, so I can't specifically say on that. If you're talking about normal like game textures and whatnot, I don't think that is something that is currently on our slate, but again, that's really outside of my area. I will say that we have a ton of textures in the game. And if something like that were to ever happen, I would not expect that it would be a all in one shot kind of thing. It would be something that would take a lot of time to do and take a lot of work to do. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question for you. All right, so why don't we dip over this way? So we'll just take a great big jump down into Mist Hollow, and I'll just slowly lower myself down here with couple of little rocket jumps. So the frills here are looking much nicer. It's one of those things going back through these kinds of areas and how, after where we've been working over the last few years, how much I miss working in lush green spaces. You know, seeing the bright green frills here and the green terrain textures and whatnot, kind of, I lament the space and want to come back to something like this again in the near future. All right, so we have another little tributary here, which I think this is about as far as we can get. We can't go all the way up. This would take you sort of into, you know, far northern Mirkwood, in between what is the Grey Mountains, Arid Mithrin, and northern Mirkwood. So kind of that space in between. I can envision that as a like craggy, mountainy region. Why don't we? So spoilers for anyone that hasn't played this region yet. We're going to be going to a place that's secret. You're not supposed to know about it, but you do. You learn about it. You learn about it through the stories. Thangdrim says, I'm sure we all miss green spaces. Fingers crossed for later this year. So, you know, I think there's always room for variety. And I know it can be when you are at the, you know, at the first car, you know, you're at the end of the track and you're waiting for more to be laid down. It's hard to see anything but what's all around you. And a lot of where we have been more, you know, arid, dry regions. Hopefully, some of those regions have their own character and interest to them that, you know, helps tide you over, especially if you're longing for, you know, green fields and green forests. Alrighty, we're gonna head up into the mountains again. This way is, you know, where I was saying we're going. I think everyone probably pretty much knows where this is right now, but like I said, in case you haven't been up here, be prepared for spoilers. What am I doing? I'm running into a wall. That's what I get for being in first-person mode. Another great view of the valley down here. This area is one of the several areas that are on my docket for a great rock replacement pass. Not necessarily changing the rocks used in these regions, but changing them over to, you know, same style of rocks, so same shape forms and whatnot, just a different entity that won't get the appearance pollution that is pretty rampant through particularly this area, because we were, you know, I think what happened was we were building these regions in general, in a specific way, and then we made some changes to the back end of how certain rocks are rendered, and that led to a lot of shared rocks kind of getting confused, and oftentimes you'll be like going through a space and you'll see like, oh hey, that's not supposed to be a brown rock, like that should be a gray rock, that sort of thing, or that should be so snowy, but it isn't. And so replacing these kind of shared rocks with variants of rocks that are specific colors instead, I think is a very necessary thing. Salil Alfie says, I would have loved sand dunes as far as the eye can see rather than forests. And I think, we may get there at some time. Certainly, one of the challenges for building a region like that is building a region in that way that is interesting and feels like there are things to do in it, because that's somewhat counter to what a desert is, right? There's life that happens there, but it's a lot of trackless space. Um, and so it's hard to represent that trackless space when uh, when you also need to make sure that there's gameplay happening in there. Sen says, "Well, Harad is a lot greener in the game than my imagination, at least." Well, I think some of that too is, I've talked a bit about, and welcome to Lindleby, everyone, where the rivers that we were following kind of lead out to. We're gonna go up into Lindleby housing as well to keep following that river, and then we'll work our way back down, and I'll go jump off some more waterfalls for you all. Um, so yeah, so regarding the comment about Harad being much greener than anticipated, I think some of that too was, we aren't building in the building landscape in the way that we used to. We're not building it as a theme park ride like we originally did. And when we were building it as that theme park kind of experience, it was really easy to just be like, okay, hey, now this is this kind of land. Oh, here's our hard border. Here's another kind of land. I think with Harad and just what we've been building in general, we want to show a more natural progression between the biomes, between the types of landscape that you'll encounter. Now I'm going to need to, oh, there we go. Enter. So that gave us the flexibility to have Harad have elements of um, those more arid spaces without having it be a super harsh transition between them, right? Um, Building up into here was a lot of fun because we had also built Sundergrot right on the other side, which we'll probably climb up into as well. And I was like, oh, this is super close. How do I like, how do I negotiate this? Um, but it was nice to be able to have elements of that dwarf structure there. Uh, but Lindleby was a lot of fun. The Lindleby housing neighborhood was a lot of fun to build too, just because of how windy it is and kind of atypical of a Hobbit space. And honestly, like between this and what we did in Swanfleet for the Hobbits, I feel like both of them scratched an itch that, Hobbits aren't necessarily expected to exist in. Thangdrum says, "I'm eager for a certain jungle area to the south." I wonder where that could be. There's jungles in the south. I don't know about that. Druidsfire says, "I thought there were enough dunes, but also appreciated the variety, so it's more than nothing but dunes." That is, that was one of our main goals, especially since when it comes to building landscape for expansion packs, how we approach that and what we do has grown over the years. Where, in the past, an expansion pack might have been one region. Now it comprises multiple regions. Or what might classically be thought of as a region, right? And I think that variety exists too. Where we have an expansion pack like Minas Morgul, which I think kind of comes basically with two regions. It comes with Mordor Besieged and Minas Morgul itself, the which is a smaller landscape offering than, you know, like what we did for Corsairs of Umbar, which had, or Gundabad even. But even Gundabad, we kind of treated each section of it like its own region. So even Gundabad was kind of like 6 regions. You know, our trip into Harad, we stuck to like 4 or so regions per expansion pack. Made them a little bit bigger and tried to really hit home on the character of each of them. So it varies. Thangrim says, Imlad Morgul feels like 2 to 3 regions, to be fair. I think some of that is because even though it's a much smaller space, it is the variation in the variation in what is there in terms of biome helps achieve that feel considerably more. So you have Mordor Besieged, which is a new take on, you know, Gorgoroth. Then you had, you know, Imlad Morgul itself, which, you know, you had Minas Morgul, you had the cliffs across the way from it, leading up into the mountains. You had the little forest area way high up in the mountains, which the name escapes me at the moment. So, you know, I think we had some pretty stark diversity in a smaller space, which can help make it feel that way. With Harad, I feel like we really wanted to try to feel like we were living in it a little bit longer than we might have actually been in it, right? Having the bigger regions, showing, you know, trying to build it up as a bigger, larger set of regions. You know, starting trees. I'm running really fast, so the far view is popping in. You know, so I think that's kind of our approach. Was our approach to it is, you know, we had Harad as this counterpart to Gondor. So making sure that we were able to show it as a region as broad and as interesting as Gondor was important. All right, where am I? All right, we gotta go that way. I might rocket jump over some stuff. There we go. All right, we're gonna rocket jump. One of the things that I've recently been, or that I shouldn't say recently, this was last December, not December 2025, but December 2024. One of the things that I was playing with was pusher volumes, so that we could have effects, kind of like what we do in the Inn of the Forsaken, where you jump down the slide and it just kind of pushes you the whole way down, and you don't die because of it, because that's what we wanted to have happen. But sort of like what you just saw happen there, where I kind of skated down things a little bit, but try to have volumes that would give you uncontrolled physics sliding, and I got it working. Oh, see, this is an area where you're not supposed to be. This is not where you're supposed to be. I think I kill you anyways if you try to get down there, so it's okay. It's okay. But I got it working. But there were concerns about playing with physics in that way. You know, uncontrolled sliding, and what that could do to a player, what that could do to the server. So that hasn't gone anywhere. But I'm still like curious and intrigued about how we could find ways to make it feel like the water is having an effect on you. Make it so that it feels like it's moving you. All right, I'm gonna get out of the water here because I think you've had enough of me jumping off of waterfalls and into stuck spots and out of stuck spots. Let me just rocket jump up onto dry land. We'll take this other detour up here as well. Though I think this is just a flat out, I think that's just a flat out waterfall too. Can I get up there? No, I can't. I can't go anywhere back there. Or can I? Oh, I can. That's right. Because there's a wood troll camp back there. Thangdrim says, speaking of Mordor, do you think Nirn and Lithlad would be big enough to be included separately, much like Gorgoroth, or together in a single expansion? I think that depends on what we would want to do in those spaces, and how much of those spaces would be produced to go along with it, because those are both substantial areas of landscape. If you look at like source material maps, those are pretty large areas. They are, where Gorgoroth was the kind of the seat of power in Mordor. You have Nirn and Lithlad, which have different functions for the region. Like Nirn in particular is kind of the breadbasket of Mordor, right? It is where the armies of Mordor were fed from, if that makes sense. And so there's a lot that could be done in those kinds of spaces. All right. Well, I don't want to take this quest. I just want to follow the river. And then Lithlad is similar. There are aspects of it. All right, we don't need to go any further than this. There are aspects of it that are important to Mordor as a whole, but they're not where people think of when they think of Mordor. When people think of Mordor, they more often than not do think of Gorgoroth. They think of Mount Doom. They think of Barad-dûr, and so it's on us whenever we get to those areas to build something that has its own character and kind of its own life that can be supportive of, but also distinct from what's going on in Mordor. All right, we'll continue our way south. We are almost into the Floodfells. Just got to cross the river somewhere, but we'll get there. Druid's Fire says, even the current in-game map for those areas gives hints of what kinds of landscape and flora could be there. Yeah, I think, though, it is one of those things where talking about how some people might be fatigued with kind of barren and blasted landscapes. Like, Mordor is a little hard-pressed to not do that, right? All right. Let's get back to this. We're back in the valley and we're following along the river now. We got 20 minutes left. We'll see how far we can get. This little ruined structure here is something that has always been fond to me, and I had such plans for it. When I originally built this, I had in my head thought about doing a world event system associated with it, where players work with dwarf smiths and lumberjacks and whatnot to rebuild the bridge so that the dwarves can once again access this treasure or whatever it is over here. And maybe this culminates in the opening of a new instance. But we have long since moved on from this region in thinking about that. I like this view too, because you can see the ruins and then more ruins behind it, and then the peaks kind of like further in the distance. I think the silhouetting in these regions in particular are very strong. You get a good sense of character and silhouette by running around through here. Druid's Fire says, so hire Rob Thornley and Adso to do it. One of these days, I'm going to do something with them. Mark my words. Adso is going to be a key component to the defeat of the next raid boss, I'm sure of it. Alright, I gotta let my server catch up a little bit because I'm running too fast. This is what happens when you are booking it and it's like, oh wait, hold on, I gotta load the terrain underneath you, slow down. There we go. It caught up. Alright. And a little bit of trivia too with this guy here. So we have two different kinds of Warg Rider creature behaviors. And we have the Warg Riders that you see in things like Moria, which are just creatures with... They're basically just wargs with a effect on them that makes it look like they're riding a goblin. Or a goblin is riding them. And then we have the mounted combat style Warg Riders. And when we made the creatures for this region, the person that made the creatures accidentally gave the Warg Riders the mounted combat behaviors, which are not at all suited for craggy, steep terrains, and were often like chasing after people and launching themselves off of cliffs and all of that fun stuff. And so because of that, we'd be playtesting the region and you would just see a warg rider just like from up above a cliff somewhere just like rocket off and down into a valley. We have more of our Anduin tributaries here, and then also the White Horse. This was a tricky little POI to make too because the detail of the terrain and the degree of detail that the object itself has, it was hard to get the terrain mesh to work well in this space, while also still having like frills and whatnot show up where it's supposed to. So it was a tricky thing to make, but we made it happen. Hello, Wender Drew. Welcome to the stream. You're welcome for the UI scaling and whatnot. We're excited to have that be our first step in that effort, with more to come on it. All right, so we'll follow the White Horse over here, and then I think I want to go up to Sundergrot next. Sundergrot was a exercise in multiple versions as well, because we have the current, air quotes, modern day Sundergrot, and then we also had Sundergrot of the past, which was bright and shiny and golden, and then you had a version where it was Sundergrot under siege and everything was ruined and there's fire everywhere. I had a lot of fun making that area, and I hope that Maid of Lions was not too frustrated by the complexity of the space. Hellhunt says, I remember the first time seeing the White Horse. It was one of the wow moments of landscape through the game. We're happy you think that. That was, I think, the artist that was working on the White Horse spent a lot of time kind of like agonizing over, getting it set up just right and making sure that, the way it was set up was going to work out well. And there we go. We're going to get there eventually. It's interesting, even in this region, looking at how we built things, how we built structures, particularly the dwarf structures then, and this is only a few years ago. Like what a difference even between how we built the Vales of Anduin and Wells of Langflood with the dwarf structures compared to, you know, what we did in, I think it was what, Farouk Khazar in Gondor, and then also some of the stuff that we've done in for the Temamir, like just the difference in, you know, how it all comes together and how we arrange and position and utilize those structures has just changed as well. I think we're a bit more experimental with it than we used to be. So this here, you can see what's going on in the landscape here. This is actually one of my like pet peeves is and where we can tag certain terrain textures to not allow scene stuff on it. And that means it just nukes everything. And then so it leaves you with these bald patches. And I think what's happening is it's these cliff textures here, which are kind of noised in, but where they're prominent, they're telling the game, hey, don't draw scene assets here. Don't put grass here, don't put rocks here, don't put trees here, because it's a cliff. And so when we have these kinds of terrain textures like this, we kind of have to go in and paint an additional layer of terrain texture on top of it that says like, no, no, it's okay. You can have scene stuff here. So I'm going to rocket jump my way up into Sundergrot from here. So this was all facade, but for the Sundergrot dungeon itself, I built a special custom day file so that, you know, you could walk out on these bridges in the dungeon and it would imply that you were in this little valley. Let's see. Hellhunt says, it's fun to find stuff like that. You just run around minding your stuff and suddenly there's something you didn't expect at all. I think that's one of the things that we enjoy doing when we're building these regions is including that kind of thing. All right, whew, that was a lot of rocket jumping. We finally made it up here into High Sundergrot, where it is just ruins, all sorts of ruins. But we have, let's see if I can get a good view of it from here. Where we have the view of the lake. Can I get over here? There we go. And then in the north of that view is the wall that you see in Lindleby housing. One of my original thoughts for Lindleby housing too was to include a dungeon with it, where you could go into the ruins, you know, some of the ruins of Sundergrot through Lindleby housing, and kind of use that as a way to, you know, get neighborhood reputation by doing stuff in the dungeon. But I never got around to do it. That's another cutting room floor idea and project. We have a lot of those. We do have a lot of those. All right, we'll work our way back up. Building ruins and just playing with rotating structures in certain ways is always interesting. You get some really great unexpected shape forms and whatnot when you do that. Let's see. So let me get out of rainy land and into a good view. It seems like there's a bunch of questions that are being asked, so let me get out of here to do that. Yeehaw. As I fall through things that I shouldn't be in, and I work my way down through the clouds and the snow. And where does this take me? We're working our way down, and you're seeing behind the scenes of the facades that we create. And now we have water. Druid's Fire says, that's one really cool thing that I would like to see you folks showcase in the 20th anniversary retrospectives next year, showing how the world building leveled up over the years. You know, that is a little tricky because we have gone through and done so many revisions on existing things. So you end up there aren't really any regions anymore that look and feel the way they used to from when the game launched. I think probably the only regions I would say that still have mostly original game look and feel to them are North Downs, Trollshaws, and Misty Mountains. I would say those are probably the three main ones that haven't really gotten modernized all that much. Um, Mr. Alex says, "Hello, scenario. Is it possible to make the walls of the smaller towns like Zajana accessible? I mean, climbing the walls of the town are half the fun being in a medieval city." Um, so I did not specifically build Zajana, so I'm not exactly sure what walls you're speaking of. Certainly, there are some that in any place that we build that are like okay to climb on, and then there are others that we don't want people climbing on for various reasons, whether it's associated with stuck spots or it gives you a view of an area that is not built yet, such as the areas south of Zajana. Um, that we don't really want people to be able to just like casually see. So, there may be areas where that can be resolved, and there are certainly areas where those walls are intentional. I will say too that in general we have kind of leaned into being a little bit more generous. I think is the word with our usage of things like walls and physics, where for performance purposes, we're not as concerned about having the physics of some things line up in exactly a one-to-one sort of way, um, because that can be expensive, that can be detrimental to gameplay if something is too complex. And so a lot of times, especially in some of our more recent constructions, we we lean towards it being less 100% accurate than we might have been in the past. And I know there are also some instances, not instances, but like occasions where specific designers have been particularly um, what's the right word for this? Have been particularly focused on making the physics of a space less complex. Thinking about some of the towns in Gondor, thinking about Dale, where there are physics walls on physics barriers on like low fences and whatnot that you wouldn't expect there to be, um, and some of that is a potentially a like decision by the designer who was working on building that space. Some of it might have a specific reason, like, oh hey, there's a stuck spot here that if we tried to fix it, we would have to do more work to provide a way out of it than if we just put up a wall. So there are a multitude of reasons why there might be barriers throughout an area. Uh, all right, let's get a good view, and then I'll check in on some more questions. There we go. Gussie Mary says, "We saw you're teaching about the rivers, so we wanted to come along and learn." Well, I can't say that I am teaching specifically about the Annuan, but we are running along it and talking about what went into building it. Here we are at the Carrock. This is this is actually a spot that I want to like point out too. One of the things that I was experimenting a little bit with here in the Carrock was painting stairs. Um, to as an experiment to reduce the complexity. Talking about reducing complexity. Instead of hand placing individual steps, I made a terrain texture that looked like stairs going up through it and painted it down. I don't know how successful it ultimately is. but it was an attempt at least to add something of interest. All right, let's zoom in. Let's see. Oh, and going back, Mario Justin said probably Enten Moors is mostly the same as release. That is also true. I don't think we've done a like legendary server pass on the Enten Moors. We have done work to maybe change the textures, but generally scene files and decorations we stay away from in that sort of space. Thangdrum says, coming into the best zone in the game, IMO, the Vales, cozy environment, love all the small quest lines. Yeah, I think the Vales of Anduin was kind of a breather region for us. Oh, we see here, this is what I'm talking about, the texture pollution, where we've got some that think they want to be snowy and some that want to just be normal. So this is an area, too, that needs to have that fix done. Fertold Realm says, what program do you use to make this, the rivers? So we have our own level design tool that we call World Builder that we use to sculpt the landscape with. I will, at least in more modern regions, I don't believe that we didn't use it for the Vales of Anduin, but we have a tool called World Machine, which helps us produce more natural looking terrain and landscape that we can then import into our tools and further edit from there. All right, so we are getting close to time. We did not get as far as I thought I was going to get because there are just so many little rivers all over the place in this region. So, maybe we'll go up this river, and a good stopping point will be a little Bjorning settlement not too far from here. So yeah, you can see in this already there's like 3 different types of rocks showing up, and that's all because these were previously rocks that were all shared with individually set appearances to them, and then when we changed how these entities worked on the back end, they stopped being able to be shared information, and so whatever version of that rock loads up first, and whatever texture is on it kind of goes on to every single other one as you load it. All right, so we'll run up here. We'll go over by a couple of minutes so that we can run up here, take a look at things, and then run back to the cozy Bjorning village. But we make our way up. Over here on the right is one of the exits from Goblin Town. And then you can also get access into the Misty Mountains from here as well, into like the original game Misty Mountains, or Extreme Misty Mountains, the add-on that we added shortly after the launch of the game, rather. But up here we've got our rivers running along the river, going down into the Anduin. I think this ends with like a small lake or pond or something with some waterfalls coming into it as well. Yeah, here we go. So the waterfalls are kind of around the bend. Around the bend, there they are. All right, so let's head our way back. So Mr. Alex, yes, that is on my very long list of to-dos, is to go through and do region rock passes. I did do a pass on the Great River and Eastern Rohan maybe about a year or so ago, and I need to find time to be able to do that in Western Rohan, do that here in the Vales of Anduin, and all the way up through into Langflood, as well as into Elderslade as well, though I think most stuff in Elderslade seemed okay, but never hurts to check. All right. So yeah, you can see this is the wrong texture. This is a texture from floodfells that should not be here. One of the things that's always interesting in building these regions where you go from one rock type to another is just trying to, make sure that you're blending them well. Because like, for example, here too, we've got this kind of brown rock from the Bjorning lands. We've got the gray rock here. We have oh, come on, let's launch. Launch. We've got the snowy rocks from higher up behind us. And then we've got this light gray rock there as well. So it's just like, it's a lot of different kinds of rocks all happening in the same space. Fortunately, most of them are just the same rock scaled and rotated in different ways. So fixing and replacing them should be somewhat painless. But, alrighty. Well, we are at our 3 p.m. time, which means we should wrap this up here. We did not get as far as I was expecting to get, but I think we got a good chunk of the way down through. Next river stream that we do, we'll head even further south. Maybe we'll actually get to Rohan by then. So thank you everyone for hanging out on this journey down the Anduin. We are probably, let's zoom out. So yeah, we started all the way up here in Gundabad, and we are now, down around here. So yeah, we did, in the grand scheme of things, we started here, and we made it to about here. And we have all of this to go to get through the Anduin. So this is probably several streams. But thank you everyone for coming and hanging out. Next week, we have a cave troll stream with myself and Alan Mackey, Orion, our lead designer, where we're going to be talking about Bull Roar, since that's in everyone's mind right now, especially with all of our instance testing and whatnot that's been going on. After that, we've got my March Casual Stroll, which will probably be a break from the rivers, and we'll be previewing our Update 48 region. Either that or Rivendell housing, one of the two. We're still figuring out the timing on all of that stuff. But anyways, thank you so much, everyone, for coming by, hanging out, asking your questions. And I will see you all next week on Thursday we have a cave troll, and then again next month for our next Casual Stroll stream. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great afternoon.